So Knights of Guinevere,
What about it?
what's it about?
Watch the
Unhelpful commentary video. Right, so the Knights of Guinevere is releasing next week, and I've learned from my mistakes with the Digital Circus videos, so I'm going to have my theory done early. This video is going to be covering the 2 trailers for the show that we have so far, the promotional images released on Glitch's socials, and the dedicated website made for this show to figure out what's going on with these guys, why is the bubblegum girl from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory back, and since when was Gomez Addams her father? Let's get into it. Lots of the information for this show is scattered, so I think the best place to start with is a general description of what we're looking at. In Glitch's own words, The Knights of Guinevere is a psychological thriller set in a place called Park Planet, a worldwide theme park suspended in the clouds. In the shadowy lands below the park resides a broken android princess who is the ticket for the better lives for 2 dreamers. That, or the end of their lives. This is a decent bit of scaffolding to figure out what roles the characters we know about will play. First up, our android princess is clearly Gwen. We see her robotic parts in several shots, including half of the first teaser video. However, we have a large wealth of information telling us that this wasn't always the case. At some point in time, Gwen appeared to be treated relatively well, being dressed up properly and even having her own bed space, or at least a space that she spent a lot of time with humans in. Prompting the first question of the video, how did she go from this to this? We'll put a pin in that for the moment and move on to our 2 dreamers placing themselves in peril. There are 2 options for who this line could be referencing, as we see 2 sets of pairs in the trailer. Either it is Mrs. Addams and his daughter, or it is Andy and Frankie, the characters whose reference sheets we get to see in the Knights of Guinevere website. I'm inclined to lean more towards the latter for a couple of reasons. Number 1, the Parks family appears to be in control of the entire planet, so there would be very little need for them to have even more aspirations and dreams. But you do know how the wealthy elite get, so that's not out of the equation. The second reason is there is a clear risk to life for our fated pair, and nowhere in any of these shots does it show either of these 2 in any real danger. Andy and Frankie, meanwhile, are seen to be at the very least highly stressed out in the back end of this trailer. Frankie herself is very clearly one for adventure. She's a big, rambunctious labourer with a bit of childlike wonder thrown in. Andy, meanwhile, is pretty much the polar opposite. She has the standard resting bitch face along with some joint pain, disappointment in the existence of others, and being forced to clean up their messes constantly. You know what? I'm gonna call it right now. I think I might end up relating to this character. Why on earth they end up going after Gwen is another question that we're going to pin for later. So we have our Knights and we have our Guinevere. That leaves just 3 members of the announced cast without a confirmed role in the story yet. Luckily, we're only a couple of minutes into this video. The easiest one to pin down is good old Sparky here, and they simply appear to play the role of the grizzled advisor. We will most likely only see them during the start of the pilot and get a bit of exposition on how exactly this place runs, who runs it, and, judging from the missing eye, what dangers it entails. Finally, we get to the only spot left in the classic storytelling structure, the antagonist. More specifically, the pair of antagonists who have locked our princess in her tower and used her to build this kingdom in the clouds. Orville Park is a not so subtle jab at Mr. Walt Disney himself, but he does look like Gomez Addams, so I'm just going to keep calling him that. It's unclear whether they made Gwen or just found her somewhere, but nevertheless he was the one who orchestrated her capture, used her for inspiration for the park, and then strung her up to be tortured. He is a soulless man who cares only about money and power. Olivia Park may have something more to her that we haven't seen yet, but for the most part she seems just as sadistic as her father. She clearly has some sort of problem with Gwen. Whether that be jealousy or just a healthy dose of hatred for this clanker existing, she is more than capable of laying down some harsh punishment on her own. I may be wrong here, but the voice of the narrator for the teaser also sounds very close to the voice of her voice actors, yes plural, so she may be the one telling the story of this trailer, but I cannot confirm that. By telling the story, I do mean the fake fairy tale narrative thing that's going on here, not the actual POV. That will likely be from Frankie and Andy's perspective. Great, now we have some background, we know who all the characters are, and we have a general gist for the world. Now, let's take a look at my prediction for what will happen in the pilot. I'm going to try and go with a bit more of a narrative spin on this one, mostly because we've got so little to work with, so don't come after me if I get specific details wrong. The episode opens with the taping of an introduction to Park Planet. Orville in his glistening suit gives a memorized welcome to the camera that will be played upon any new ship's arrival to this part of the attraction. After stepping off the stage, he reunites with his daughter and a copy of the robot that has made him oh so rich over the past couple of decades. Olivia continues to look over her shoulder at the machine as they walk back to her room, a mixture of disdain and curiosity shaping its way across her face. This version of Guinevere lies down on her bed, taking up much more space than Olivia's small frame normally would. The pair of Parks take a good long look at the bots before Orville signals Olivia, and she takes a blade to its stomach. Grabbing the twisting tendril that snakes its way out of the exposed abdomen, Olivia wrenches it out onto the balcony where it collapses, and a set of scientists appear to strap it down and take it away. Orville explains that this rather ceremonious way of doing things is required, as it imbues the robot with the memories of the bedroom and thus the idea of a royal life. This will keep it nice and subdued and allow the empire they have built to remain. The camera pans out to a wide angle of a glistening and vibrant park before fading to black. We fade back into a weathered dock where Sparky, Andy and Frankie prepare to cast off. Frankie carries a barrel over her shoulder and across a thin plank onto their weathered fishing boat. Andy is already on board, furiously typing away on their computer, and Sparky stands on the docks taking a quick smoke while staring off into the greyed skies. The sound of commotion catches the attention of Sparky, who tilts the head only slightly to get a better view. Down on the edge of a pier, a homeless man has been beaten to the ground by 2 members of the Planet Guard, their bright monitors hiding what are assumed to be constant sneers of authority. They dictate what does and doesn't happen around these parts, and have a particular fondness for picking on those they know won't put up a fight. Naturally, they've left Sparky alone. Frankie calls out from the deck of the ship, which draws Sparky's attention back to the task at hand. Not taking a moment to look back at the brazen violence being committed, Sparky steps casually onto the boat and strides up to the wheel. The vessel cuts through the choppy waters underneath the ever-grey sky, its dull monotony only interrupted by large tubes of glowing liquid that appear to be powering something important. Despite working here for many years, the group has never found what they actually run on, only that there seems to be a great number of valuable items lodged in the seafloor around them. In this hellscape of a planet, that's at least one thing that makes their lives a little bit easier. As Frankie drops the large claw off the back of the boat with a familiar splash, Sparky turns to Andy, who is still feverishly typing away on her laptop. They make a backhanded remark on how Andy should get off that stupid machine and be some more help around here, to which Andy snaps back that she is helping. If it wasn't for her, they would have sunk on this tin can years ago. Besides, she doesn't care about this way of life, she just needs to get enough cash in her pockets to buy a one-way ticket to anywhere else, preferably somewhere drier. The bickering is interrupted by a loud call from Frankie at the back of the boat. There's something on the line. Sparky waltzes over to inspect, and can spot a distinct blue colouring. Something from the parks above, it seems. Perhaps it's some machinery. Likely useless in its primary function now, but the metal sells for good money. As Frankie drags the last of the chain out of the water, however, we get a good look at something that definitely isn't just a random piece of machinery. It's the disfigured body of the mascot of this planet. The episode hard cuts to Olivia's bedroom, still in much the same condition as it was before, though now with several machines placed somewhat sporadically around it. An aging version of the young girl we saw previously adjusts the sliders on one of the monitors, causing the mechanisms to pulse blue for a moment before settling back down. Olivia Park attempts to hide a groan as she sits back in her chair, staring longingly at an old portrait of her father on a nearby mantle. With him gone for so long, the once great park planet had fallen to ruin, kept alive only by the horrible secrets lurking beneath it. While the interest in the parks had long since faded, the energy made by the clones of that wretched robot still provided ample power, and more importantly, ample money to keep some sections running. Just as Olivia finally starts to relax, however, she hears news of something happening down in the energy labs. A pristine Guinevere naps soundly in a field of grass, surrounded by cheery animals who watch on, infatuated by her beauty. Smash cut to the real world, where the horribly disfigured Gwen we saw a few minutes ago breaks free of the straps binding her down, throws off the lab-coated scientists surrounding the solid steel bed she's been placed on for examination, and rips a hole through the roof of the building. Water gushes out of the newly created hole and begins to fill the room at an alarming rate. Meanwhile, within her own mind, Gwen calmly awakens to the sound of birdsong, before penning one of the animals that lay at her side. And that's my prediction for the first episode of the show. Or rather, my prediction for the first half of the first episode of the show, because I don't think there's enough information here for me to make a confident guess on what happens next. We know one thing for certain, and that is that Andy and Frankie end up on the abandoned remains of parts of the park in the clouds, while Sparky is no longer with them. It is very likely that they have taken the remains of Gwen that they have found to the clouds in order to try and figure out some answers, but the logistics of how they get there, what they do with the body, and what happens next are not discernible with the information I have. This is likely on purpose because they obviously don't want to spoil the end of the episode in the trailer. So to make up for it, I'll give one last assessment of what every character wants in the second half of this episode. Andy and Frankie both want to know what's up with this character they found, Frankie out of sheer curiosity, and Andy can see if finding it will yield a large quantity of cash. Sparky is disinterested in the whole thing. They've spent their whole life in this routine, and they don't plan on changing now because of a stupid robot. Gwen is in a very foggy haze at the moment, vaguely remembering aspects of her past life, but not being coherent enough to put them together. Olivia is in a state of mild panic after figuring out that one of the Gwens is gone, and has dispatched all available forces to find it. These forces may come across Andy and Frankie at some points. And finally, Orville. Well, he's just dead. But that's all I've got for today. Thank you all for watching, and have a good one.